Reasons for doing a remaster. Doing a remaster was definitely not something we would have considered doing years ago. Why would we remake an old game versus making a new game? Turns out, there were multiple reasons to motivate us to do this. First of all, preserving the history of QUBE was important to us. This became apparent when our console publisher decided to discontinue selling the game, which meant the game would no longer be available for sale on consoles, as well as the original QUBE no longer being available for sale on Steam, and we have many fans of that version. This really motivated us to create a definitive version of QUBE that would be up to date and available on modern hardware, and would be future-proofed. This version would include QUBE, QUBE Director's Cut, other Easter eggs, this commentary, and a whole new sector of puzzles, bringing at least 4 hours of new content to the table. Another reason is that these ideas came up 18 months before the 10-year anniversary was coming up, and so we thought this would be a good time to release a remaster. We absolutely cannot believe it's been a decade since QUBE came out. A lot has happened in that time. How the project started. QUBE began life in 2009 as a student project at Newport University in South Wales, UK. We were originally going to use the Source engine, but decided to move to UDK, which is a free version of Unreal Engine 3, as it was being taught in our class, and given none of us were coders at the time, it offered a visual scripting solution, so we were able to make the game without traditional programming knowledge. Whilst the game was purely going to be for our individual portfolios to go and get jobs in the games industry, it turned out we were actually sitting on what would become a commercial indie game. Thanks to encouragement from peers and lecturers, we put the game up on ModDB and it had 10,000 downloads within a couple of weeks. Immediately, we felt like we were onto something. Soon after this, we met with the co-founder of Epic Games, Mark Rain, who thought the concept was great. We then secured funding from Indie Fund, composed of fellow puzzle game designer Jonathan Blow and other indie veterans, and were able to begin work on the game full-time. The game came out on Steam in January 2012, and we were able to pay back the funding within 4 days. This was a huge success for us, given it was our first game straight out of university. What improvements did we make? We really listened. What improvements did we make? We really listened to the community and wanted to fix stuff that was broken before, or remove stuff that just wasn't fun. There were a bunch of basic things you'd expect from a game that weren't in there, such as subtitles in other languages and an FOV slider. Why have a classic mode and director's cut mode? We wanted fans of the original to enjoy the original experience intact and enhanced. The chilled music with no voiceover or storyline to follow, just puzzle after puzzle. We felt it made sense to include the director's cut too, for fans of that version to enjoy an enhanced experience. It was crazy, isn't it? Like, how we went from over the summer we were meant to come up with an idea, and I can't remember, I think our idea was like some crap like Roman thing. I can't remember, like some 3D platformer. But
Yeah,
do you remember?
I think we were really struggling, and then we had to do a presentation to say what our idea was, and then we didn't really have anything. But then John said, "I found this animation.
Yeah.
This could work." So we basically just played the animation and said, "This is what we're going to make."
Well, yeah, because I remember we felt our thing was that other people were presenting. And we were like, oh crap, our thing is crap compared to this. And then luckily we had the lunch break, whatever it was, and then we were like, right, let's just show this animation. Huddled around.
Yeah.
And people said they didn't really get what the game was or something. Like
we didn't really understand what it was going to be either.
Yeah.
At that point. We just thought, look, we love the aesthetic of this animation, so we're going to make a game using a similar aesthetic. So, making the world out of cubes.
I think maybe it wasn't a case that people didn't really get it. I think everyone just had a different idea about what it should be, because it's quite an open concept. Then we managed to refine it over time as well.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of people, like in our class, actually played a part in helping us design it, because we had a lot of presentations, we had a lot of feedback in the early stages, which was useful.
It's very true.
Yeah, it kind of evolved quite a lot because that animation was very action focused.
Yeah.
And it organically kind of went to a puzzle direction, first person, and I remember we had that brainstorm meeting and we started thinking, oh, what if we had colored cubes that did different things?
Yeah, I think part of that was just the logistics of making everything interactable. It kind of made sense to focus on a few different types, and then as we did that, it kind of naturally drifted towards a puzzle game. The remaster was built from scratch using the Unreal Engine 4. This meant we had the opportunity to rethink and redesign areas of the original game which were problematic. Given that when creating the original game, we had no industry experience and we did not have a programmer on the team, most of the issues we faced were due to technical limitations. Revisiting the game 10 years later, and with the increased functionality of the Unreal Engine 4, we found that most of these issues were no longer relevant. We also had a huge amount of feedback from reviews, Let's Play videos, and the Steam forums, so we had a better understanding of which areas of the game needed improvement and what needed to be cut altogether. We wanted to stay true to the original, so for the most part we used the same mechanics. What we found was that in the process of recreating everything, we were able to make everything behave much more reliably. So given that we were no longer restricted by the same technical limitations, we were able to expand on a lot of these ideas and design new content. That is why many stages of the game remain almost identical, but there are other stages that have been removed and others that have been redesigned due to feedback that we received post-release.
Hi, I'm Rob Yescombe, the writer and narrative director and narrative producer for QUBE Director's Cut. I met the team when they were demoing at a student showcase and I was working as creative director at Crytek UK. And I remember sitting in the audience with the then editor of Edge magazine, and both of us, our eyes bulged out of our heads when the guys rolled out with QUBE, because at the time, the artwork was still pretty basic, but the underlying design and the intelligence of what they were showing made me sit up pretty quick. And I knew that these were guys who were going to be, in my opinion, were going to be stars. And I remember talking to them after the show and saying how impressed I was. And they said that they wanted to use the demo as their resume, as their CV to get jobs. And I remember telling them, guys, I think this game is going to be your job. And here we are 10 years later doing the remaster. The original game was a big hit, especially for such a small team. But in the reviews, a fairly high proportion of reviewers said that they wished there was more of a story. Not everybody, but it was enough to make the team consider that as an idea. So when they eventually decided to port over to console, I was extremely flattered that they remembered me and that they wanted me to write it. But there was a problem. They wanted a story, but at the time they couldn't afford to change the game. So the challenge was, how do you write a story for a game that's already finished? How do you write a story for a game that's already finished and has to feel like it was always meant to be there? More on that problem later.
Yeah, and that's how it began, and then of course all the different milestones within submitting the thing, and it was just going to be a portfolio piece, and we all got an A for whatever the highest grade for that piece of work, which was higher than anything, at least anything I've got before.
Oh yeah, same for me.
And then it kind of was like, oh, we're not stopping there. We're going to continue, and we got interest from Bithell and lecturers, and then Mark Rain, and learning more about the business side of things, and then Indie Fund.
It was actually Mike Reddy first, wasn't it? That
yes,
kind of pushed us and motivated us to go even further with this.
That's true.
Yeah, he was the one who suggested Indie Fund, wasn't he?
That's right, yeah.
So it was just really, really fortunate timing that as we finished uni, Indie Fund started, so it was just absolutely perfect timing.
It's crazy. It is crazy if you think about the odds of that happening, right?
Yeah, and also that when we started the project, it was the exact same time that UDK got announced. Because before that it was just the Unreal 3, which is very similar, but it's just not as user-friendly, and it was more of a modding tool. But for them to actually release the engine just as we started the project was really useful as well.
Yeah, with indie-friendly business terms as well, which was new as well at the time.
Yeah. I mean, they're not good terms by today's standards. There was like 25% of revenue, which is insane, but I think back then it was seen as fairly good.
Yeah, so all of that, combined, got us off the ground, which is phenomenal, and so that was a crazy journey, and it all happened so quick as well,
Yeah, I remember thinking at the time, like, it felt like quite a long process. I mean, if you're talking about from when we started to actually when it got released, it's probably like just over 2 years. Full production was like 15 months or so, which felt like a long time, but then you think how long games take to make now. That was really quick.
Yeah.
It was really fast, yeah.
Yeah, we were thinking 6 months originally, weren't we? Yeah. June 2010, I think.
We were very naive and we underscoped what we needed to do massively, I think. On that.
But to be honest, I thought it would take us 6 months to do the remaster, and it's taken a similar time, so I think it's just a common mistake everyone makes. The reason we included collectibles is that it can give each level a decent amount of additional challenge and replay value. They are intended as mini puzzles rather than hidden objects, so their location should be fairly obvious when you walk into a level, but how to reach them is less clear. Another reason to include collectibles is that it allows for more skill-based gameplay. People often say that a good puzzle game is one where once you know the solution, it can be easily implemented. And this is something I kept in mind when designing the puzzles. However, through experimentation I found there was a range of other ways you can interact with the game's mechanics, which often led to challenges which were satisfying to complete. These challenges wouldn't be suitable for the critical path, as it may have led to players getting stuck. However, these challenges were ideal for collectibles given that all collectibles are optional. Having said that, not all collectibles require skill, and when it came to choosing where to place each collectible, I would usually design a puzzle with the primary objective in mind, then I would play around with each level in game and see if there were any other areas of the map which could be reached. And if it was satisfying to reach each area, that would be a good location for a collectible.
I've never had the opportunity, before or since, to write a game that's already been released and already been reviewed. Now, a common criticism in the reviews of the original version was the similarity to Portal, Valve's game. It's a first-person puzzle game in a fairly blank test chamber type environment, so it was perhaps a fair comparison. But at the time, I think that critique maybe hurt the team's feelings a little bit, but in fact, it presented a completely unique opportunity for narrative in the director's cut, which was that we knew what people were expecting from a story. They were expecting Portal, and Portal famously has a voice in your ear of whom you are increasingly suspicious, and the curtain is pulled back towards the end to reveal that she's evil and she wants you dead. It's iconic. So we knew right from the off that players of the director's cut were anticipating being lied to. They had been conditioned by Portal, a game that all of our players had most likely played. They'd been conditioned not to trust a voice in their ear. And in fact, games at the time were full of that kind of betrayal. The minute someone was friendly to you, you knew they weren't really your friend. Players had been taught to expect the worst. So it made sense to me that that was what the game should be about. The importance of having faith in the possibility of a good outcome. In fact, that's the very first line you hear when you wake up. We need to have faith in the possibility of good. And my ambition was to re-educate players, even just a tiny little bit, to re-educate them to be less cynical, to be a little bit more optimistic. I felt that we could offer a positive message here, that there is real hope, and that the people who seem to be trying to help you in life maybe actually are trying to help you. Now, that subversion of the expectation of betrayal is a twist that is only possible because the game was written after it was reviewed. It's a completely unique circumstance that could only happen in games.
test!
How was it doing a remaster compared to making a new game? We actually thought it would be relatively straightforward given we're mostly recreating a game that's already out there, rather than designing something from scratch. Famous last words in game dev though, eh? We thought it would take 6 months, but it's actually taken 15 months. Even though we had all the modern assets ready to roll from QUBE 2 and the design from QUBE 1, there was still a lot of restructuring to do. We had to expand the team to be able to tackle the amount of level design and art passes that were required to truly enhance the game, rather than copy and paste the original game.
The message of the game is to have faith, to not assume the worst. Novak doesn't know if you can hear her, but she decides to have faith and tries anyway. And in this monologue, the story about the teenager being shot and you shooting them is an allegory for the whole story of the game. That taking a cynical view of life can only end badly. We need to have faith in the possibility of good.
Dark.
From Sector 5 onwards is where you'll notice the most change in terms of level design. And for Sector 5 the main change is that the neon switches section has been removed. For those who don't remember or haven't played the original game, in the neon switches section it was pitch black and players had to activate a cube before they could interact with it. Unfortunately, players just found this cumbersome and not particularly enjoyable. I even had people say they got this far and completely quit the game. It also didn't feel like there was a lot we could do to improve it, so it just didn't feel worthwhile to create it again for the remaster. This left a large gap in Sector 5, seeing as half the puzzles from the original game had now been removed. I don't feel like this was much of an issue though, because it felt like the magnets and the lasers had a lot of untapped potential. And generally speaking, it's better to have a small set of mechanics which complement each other rather than a large set of mechanics which only get used a handful of times. The magnets still behave as they did in the original, but a lot of work has gone into improving the physics. Most notably, there is a snap system which makes the behaviour much more forgiving, seeing as puzzles no longer require perfect timing. It also prevents players from trying to brute force puzzles because objects will always snap to a location on the grid. One of the main gameplay challenges when designing the remaster was standardising the physics behaviour. This is because for the original game we were using the visual scripting system inside Unreal 3, which did not allow us to easily replicate each actor, and this led to certain objects behaving differently in different areas. For example, the distance the blue cube will launch the player, or the physics behaviour for the green cube would be tailored to each puzzle. For the remaster, we wanted to standardise the behaviour as much as possible, but we also needed the physics to work in a range of predefined situations. This was a challenge because usually you test and refine the physics behaviour at an early stage of development, then once that feels right you can use that as the basis for future content. However, that is not something you can easily do when for the most part all of the levels have already been designed, so we had to test and iterate on both the physics and level design in order to standardise the behaviour and also get it to work with every puzzle in the game.
The music score for the director's cut is completely different to the original. The director's cut was composed by Kieran Marshall, who had scored a short film for me the year before we started on this. I gave him what I think is a very difficult brief, which was that this score has to evoke both trust and mistrust. It has to evoke faith and fear, has to evoke the tragic and the triumphant, and it has to somehow do all these things at the same time, which is a very difficult idea to pull off. But one of the key techniques he ended up using is the feeling that part of the music sounds like it's hiding behind another. So listening to it has the feeling of almost like peering through the mist to try and see something, or the feeling of trying to hear someone calling you over the sound of the sea, the ocean. You know that something's there, but you just can't quite see it fully. The other big challenge for him on a more practical level was planning for a scenario where the player might get stuck on the same puzzle for a while and so has to listen to the same music track on a loop without going insane. And I think he's done an absolutely magnificent job on both counts, to have something that is as powerful as this score is, but at the same time as unobtrusive as it is. Really beautiful.
I have faith you can hear me. It's going crazy out there. The outside of the cube is coming away in big chunks.
We recorded Rupert Evans, who plays 919. We recorded him at a studio called Hackenbacker in Soho in London. Rachel Robinson, who plays Novak, was recorded remotely in LA while I was still in the UK. And my memory of the time is that Rachel was having a difficult time in her personal life. And when things are painful, sometimes it's nice to have a piece of art to pour those feelings into. There's one key monologue, which is her God is Dead monologue, where I think she really laid bare those emotions. We recorded almost all of her lines with me directing remotely, but that monologue we discussed together at length first, but then she went away and recorded it alone that night. Now, Rachel is an extraordinarily capable performer. She didn't need that much leeway, But I wanted to see what isolation would do for her performance. Because so much of the state of all of the characters in this story, the player included, is a direct result of isolation. And I have to say, coming back to it all these years later, I still feel deeply moved by her delivery of that monologue, because I can hear more than her character. I can hear her.
Sector 6 is the level which has undergone the most change when compared to the original. The reason for this is that most of the ideas from the original game were quite experimental, and they would only work in a few situations, which often felt contrived. As with most of the remaster, we felt it would be a good idea to streamline everything and focus on how each mechanic could be better utilised. So a lot of the puzzles from the original game have been removed, and what remains has been adapted in a variety of ways. The most obvious change is how the wire puzzles function. Previously there was a cable which was used to reactivate a broken cube. This made sense in the context of the derelict environment, but the physics were unreliable and the potential uses were quite limited. So the wires have been replaced with a wrecking ball type mechanic because the behaviour is much more reliable and it complements the other ideas already in the game. The AI puzzles have undergone multiple changes despite their AI behaviour being the same as it was in the original game. The difference is that because the AI behaviour is more reliable, it means there are more ways the AI can interact with the environment. For example, in the original there were occasions where we had to block the player from interacting as it could interfere with the pathfinding. This was frustrating to play, and it was also immersion breaking because there was no obvious reason why you could not interact. The levels also had to be designed around this limitation, so it felt like an issue that had to be addressed for the remaster. The first few AI puzzles remain the same, as the main purpose of them was to teach the player how the AI behaves, but the later AI levels are quite different because it felt restrictive to use the old levels when they were designed around limitations which were no longer a problem.
You heard it in her voice, didn't you?
The cube placement mechanic has been tweaked when compared to the original. The main difference is that players can now place single cubes on any of the 3 placeable surfaces. This means that some puzzles have solutions that were not possible in the original game. On occasions, players could use this feature as an exploit to skip entire stages of a puzzle. In these situations, we would have to adapt the puzzle design in order to prevent the player from doing that. However, on other occasions, players would find solutions that, while they weren't my original intention, they were often quite clever. And they were also working within the rules of the game, so it did not feel like these solutions should be prevented. It's also good to have multiple solutions because everyone thinks slightly differently, so it would feel too restrictive to say that each puzzle can only have one solution. The puzzle design process varied depending on the area of the game. For example, the early levels are quite simple and did not require any changes. However, the further you go into the game, the more changes there are when compared to the original. Some puzzles have had tweaks in order to fix design issues, and others have been completely replaced. When it came to creating new content, most puzzles came from a process of design and experimentation. I would often find that while I was testing the game, I would discover new ways to interact with the mechanics. Then I would attempt to design a puzzle where that particular way of interacting was the solution. So in that sense, the ideas behind the puzzles were discovered through testing and experimentation, but the actual layout for each puzzle was designed. One thing that was helpful was working with constraints. The reason being that when you have too much freedom, it can be difficult to pinpoint exactly what you are trying to make. And personally, I have often found that when I have a lot of creative freedom, it can be easy to get sucked into an endless loop of trying to refine the core gameplay until it is perfect, while not making any progress in other areas of the game. When it came to the remaster, there were design issues we inherited from the original, but we weren't willing to make any major changes because then it would feel like a different game. And this was beneficial because without the temptation to change the core gameplay, you're able to focus on what is already there and come up with creative solutions.
How it's been working on games full-time for over 10 years. In over a decade of making games, we've learned a ton. We've shipped multiple different games across various studios and different game engines. So much has changed in the game industry. We've attended a crazy amount of events and won awards, but we've also dealt with the tough parts of making games. Overall, QUBE still has a close place in our heart as it was our first game and the game that got us to where we are today. The future of QUBE. The founders of Toxic Games have other ventures, such as Savory Entertainment and Jaw Drop Games, to take care of. However, as mentioned before, QUBE has a place in our hearts. It's uncertain right now what we do next with the franchise, if anything at all. But I guess it also depends on how this version of the game does. We do have ideas and had been developing a level editor for the game a while back, but that got shelved. However, making this into a reality is a different story. Anyways, stay tuned and watch this space for more.
When it came to redesigning the final puzzle, I wanted to provide a feeling of culmination, and I thought the best way to achieve that was to try and combine every mechanic into one puzzle. The logic being that it would feel like a test of everything that had been taught up to this point. This puzzle went through several iterations, and I was not able to include absolutely everything that had been introduced up to this point, but all of the main mechanics are present. This means that the final puzzle is more complex than everything that has preceded it, and I hope this will clearly signify to players that it is the final challenge. However, one issue with having a puzzle so complex is that it can be overwhelming when you first enter the level. In order to address this issue, the puzzle has been split up into multiple stages, which has two benefits. First of all, it means that it's easy to get started, and usually once someone gets started, they feel invested and they're more likely to continue. And it also means that important pieces of a puzzle can be revealed over time, which prevents players from being distracted by decoys, and it can guide the player towards the real solution.
Oh God, you need to get out of there right now. The whole thing is coming apart. There's an escape shuttle dead ahead. Get in and go!
No, it's not a shuttle. It's a coffin. And they want you to launch yourself into the incinerator. You knew the second you woke up here. I know you knew it. Our fingers are crossed behind our back.
Go! Don't listen to him. He's crazy. He's lying. I don't know. Get in the shuttle.
They're trying to jam my signal. Don't listen to her.
Please, I don't want you to die.
That's the only thing they want.
I'm moving out of range. Please, go!
Do you think it's a coincidence there are no windows to prove you're in outer space? They already buried you. Don't kill yourself for them too.
The main character doesn't have a voice in the game, and that was a very conscious story design choice. I didn't want the character to decide what they believe. I wanted the player to decide, just quietly in their own mind. I didn't want to put opinions in the player's mouth. Now, as a result, for some people, the twist doesn't work because they instinctively trusted Novak from the very beginning, so they're not surprised that what she said turns out to be true. But their belief in her still supports the theme. They had faith in the possibility of good. So whomever you believe, the message is still the same, but the more conditioned you are to expect the worst, the more shocking and, I hope, the more comforting the twist becomes, which is that things really can be okay.
What a journey. Lots of...
It's been fun.
Yeah, it has. It's been fun. What a roller coaster, you know, highs and lows, but good stuff. You know, it's we're grateful to have the opportunity, I think, and to still be here today making games. You know, and
Definitely.
10-year anniversary. But yeah, no, it's been an incredible decade working on games, and QUBE was our starting point. And we've learned a lot in this time, and we've applied that knowledge to QUBE Remastered, and it's been, you know, a lot of fun and very nostalgic as well, putting this together and bringing on contributors and interestingly, you know, working with people that were kids when QUBE 1 came out. They were fans of the game who ended up working on this, so that's a pretty phenomenal thing. But yeah, we'd like to say thanks to all of the fans and everyone who's played the game and supported us throughout this time. Couldn't have been here without you, and it's great to be able to release this new version as a way to future-proof the game, as a way to give back to the fans, and yeah, for everyone to enjoy this new and improved version with a lot of new extra content. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. And thanks for playing. Do you guys want to say something?
Just thanks, really.
Yeah.
Listen to me. You're a hero. Everyone's out here waiting to talk to you.
No! No! What the hell are you doing? Stop it! Get out! For God's sake, get out!
We're all waiting for you. Everyone's waiting for you. The whole planet, your wife's there. Your entire life is waiting for you at the end.
This is the end! They're gonna burn you alive! You can still stop it, rip out the wires, smash up the bullets! Get out of there! Don't leave me! Please, don't leave me!
This is Mission Control. Damn, it's good to see you. We have someone special on the line for you.
It's me. Oh my gosh, you're okay. I knew you would do it. I knew you would, but... Just come home now, okay? Please, just come home. Here's something I never thought I'd say. The president wants to talk to you.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you just doesn't quite cut it, does it? You haven't just saved the lives of every person on this planet. You found a life we thought was lost forever. Captain Jonathan Burns of Shuttle 919. And Captain Burns, now we know you're out there. We will not rest until we bring you home, no matter what. I assure you, you are found. As for you, you may have had your doubts through all this, but you persevered. In life, we don't get proof until it's done. That's how humanity achieves great things. By having faith in the possibility of good.